Trent Cotney and John Kenney are dedicated to helping the construction industry with legal business and safety challenges. Welcome to this week's episode of Law and Mortar.
Hey, this is Trent Cotney. I'd like to welcome everybody to another episode of Law and Mortar. As always, I got John Kenney with me. John, how are you doing today?
Doing great. As always, I'm happy to be here. It's an end of the week again.
Yeah, I know. And we were talking a little bit in advance. There's this. I don't know if it's this year, maybe this year and last year, but it just seems like we're in constant change, evolution, chaos, however you want to describe it. One of the things that's interesting, I joke around, and I'm sure you have the same, but rarely do I get calls with good news. It's good for me because it helps me understand kind of what's going on out there. And we've had some recent reports in several different locations. I'd say out in California, Chicago, Minnesota, of coordinated efforts by state agencies. So what they'll do is, they'll come out, Cal OSHA will come out and investigate the site, but they've also got, state wage and hour, state workers' comp, state licensure, all that. They're looking at all these different things all at once. And Minnesota has a law that basically allows them to kind of do that. And I've seen other efforts in Chicago and elsewhere. It's interesting because it makes it very difficult for contractors to really be prepared for that kind of thing. I'm just curious, have you heard anything on your end about maybe one government agency coming out and talking to another or anything like that?
Yeah, I've heard a little bit of that too because I have some clients and people I talk to in the same area as you are, and it's interesting. Is the best way I guess to put it. But I mean, we both, you and I, have talked about this for years that it was only going to be a matter of time before the different agencies started to figure out, well, let's just not all go for our own singles when we can go together and get a home run. And I think that's what you're starting to see now. It's efficiency, but probably not for the benefit of the people that are on the other end of it.
Yeah, it makes it real difficult because you know, you're trying to always stay in the guardrails for each of these different requirements. And there's a lot of different buckets for contractors. So you've got licensure in those states that are required, you got workers' comp, you've got wage and hour, you've got OSHA, you've got all these different things that are required. And sometimes what may be required in one bucket may be not necessarily what's required in a different one, right? So it's putting contractors, field personnel in a very difficult position because you're getting asked multiple questions. You may answer correctly for purposes of OSHA, but you may be facing a misclassification claim because you got subs on the job and you said something you shouldn't have said, right? So it's a difficult thing, and it is something that I think associations and the industry needs to kind of push back on a little bit. I don't think it's fair to have all these government agencies team up on a contractor at once, especially if they're targeting roofers or other, stucco external type contractors. Something else that kind of hit the news, and I think it's interesting because we had our own Surfside, collapse here not too long ago in Florida. But New York City had that big issue with the high rise that was going up. And what's interesting is, I've heard a lot of people since then. We both used to work in Jersey, and I've had a lot of Jersey contractors and New York contractors call me and say the amount of scrutiny that they're facing now from code and compliance is astronomical. And we saw the same thing in Florida. After Surfside, any high rise whatsoever, condo was being looked at. Every board was panicking. It's still a little bit like that. It's died down a little bit. But I'm just curious, have you heard anything on your end or what your thoughts are?
Yeah, the same thing. There's a lot more heavier compliance, which, I agree is normal. After an incident, I can just say, thankfully, it was no worse than what it was, or you would really see a big step up.
Yeah.
I think on the bright side of that, just looking at the overall response from both city officials and the fire departments up there and everything, they turned a real disaster in the making into a pretty good recovery, which I think now they're more into that, post-mortem phase, looking at why it happened. And that's why I believe you're seeing the more enforcement out there to make sure that it doesn't happen in other areas. The only other thing tagging in, kind of a combination of both, you asked about what I hear. You brought up about subcontractors on the job. I'm hearing a lot of people are really starting to get into trouble with labor subs. I'm getting more and more and more questions on that, and I'm positive you probably are on the legal side. And I know you can probably go back to some of our early episodes of Law and Mortar from 4 or 5 years ago, and we talked about how it is coming in and it's growing, and it's a big part of the industry now. But it's a whole nother legal issue, risk issue, management issue, insurance issue, workman's comp, all the way down the line of things that are coming up. So I'm starting to hear a lot of problems starting to arise with that. And I'm sure you are the same.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always an issue. We've become so reliant on the use of subcontractors and sub labor that it's almost synonymous with the industry now. But the issue is just like you said, you've got quality control issues, you've got, uninsured or underinsured subs out there. You've got licensing issues like in Florida and Illinois and elsewhere. Just a whole host of different things that you have to navigate. And then not to mention the whole misclassification. If you have a sub crew that only works for you, doesn't work for anybody else, where's your gear? Doesn't have a website, they're probably your employees. You're just not paying them correctly. So,
Yeah.
you know, there's a lot of government agencies, both federal and state, that care about that, and you're seeing a lot of increased enforcement as a result. Along those lines, John, one of the things that we've seen an uptick in is OSHA inspections. It's something unusual. I don't necessarily, like I said, I don't rely on the news. I rely on the phone calls and the emails and stuff I get from contractors, and it seems like it's really picked up. One of the things I want to caution our listeners, a lot of times you don't think about this, but if you're doing bid work, if you're doing federal work, you need to be very careful about what the result is in an OSHA case, right? If have a serious injury or a willful violation, all of that could potentially impact your ability to bid certain jobs, right? So you really want to think about that. And as you're going through, if you have an informal conference and you have the opportunity to potentially resolve it, think about language that you might need in there to prevent those types of things from being coming up in personal injury lawsuits. And then obviously think about the classification itself and whether or not it can be changed to help you in the event that you're doing bid work. I know I've been seeing a lot. We've had a lot of heat injury and illness type claims come up as well. It's been, I don't know about you, John, but I walked outside earlier to grab some lunch and I came back just soaking wet. It's like walking out in a hot shower.
Yeah. This has been nationwide one of the most brutal summers I think we've ever had. It's been
By
relentless.
far. Yeah, and that's just a great reminder. It's not just hydration breaks and water. Have electrolytes ready. Make sure that that your people out in the field are aware of the signs of heat injury and illness, and have an emergency response plan in place. All that's important. Document, document, document. So, anything else on that topic, John?
No, I think that's sage advice that you gave as always. We seem to forget with all that's going on and all the headlines, we seem to forget blocking and tackling constantly, and that's what we got to keep doing in this industry.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I agree. So, we've covered a lot of different topics, John, but handpicked a special question today. Today's
Okay?
question is from Anna, and this one is directed specifically to you. You're very
Uh-oh.
popular. You're popular out there, John. So the question from Anna is: Anna has just started a company along with her husband. She's running the books and overlooking things. The husband's in operations. She wants to know as she starts scaling up, where should she go for good education on things? And in particular, she wanted to know about operations. Looks like she's doing residential now, but she may end up, says she might want to do some like commercial. Where should she go for resources? What are good places to look?
Well, I think with the type of biz you're talking about, I mean, I'm just going to give some general places to go to. Definitely Roofer's Coffee Shop is a great place to go to. I know you are an influencer there and do articles. I, as myself, I think there's a whole lot of industry things there. Not throwing a plug for myself, but of course, Anna could always reach out. I'm happy to point her in some better directions and all that. As all of our listeners know, we're always willing to take a question. But as far as I don't know what state she's in. We don't know that. But if you got a local roofing association, that's a great place to start. I always recommend starting there and then working your way up state and then, of course, national. I think a lot of contractors make the mistake of not participating locally. There's so much local information that's available, how to operate your business. And then, um, other than that, just gather as much information as you can from the manufacturers you're working for, as far as they'll help you as far as operationally, not running your business, but running your operation side as you grow, especially if you're going to get into like commercial understanding the systems.
Yeah, I agree. So Anna is from Illinois. Obviously, Chicago Roofing Contractors Association does a great job. If you're doing, roofing, NRCA is also based out of Chicago. If you're doing work over in Indiana, that association is great. Get involved with Associated Builders and Contractors. A lot of the other organizations, they help not only give you some resources, but help you connect with your peers. And then, like you said, go to manufacturer training has really elevated over the last 5 or 10 years. I'm very impressed by what manufacturers are putting out, everything from, business related, safety related sales, but very specific technical expertise and analysis on how to put on their systems and products. So really recommend that. And of course, as you said, John, you're the go-to for, if I got a question, I always come to you. So that's always a good resource. Well, listen, I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in for another episode of Law and Mortar. We appreciate your questions. Keep them coming. If you got something for John or I, send it our way. We're happy to answer them. You can get me via email at trent.cotney@arlaw.com or anywhere social at Trent Cotney. John, how can they get you?
Anywhere social at @jkenney, or you can certainly get me on my email, which is jkenny@cotneyconsulting.com.
Yeah, and pretty soon you and I will be on the road at Western States. It's coming up here in Vegas for a week at the
Yep.
end of September. So if
And
you're
so
out
everybody
that
knows
way,
out there, we're going to do our history and roofing again this year out
history
there.
roofing, fresh content, be there, be square, come by, say hi. Looking forward to seeing everybody. And thank you again. Stay tuned next time for another episode of Lawn Mower.
See you later. Thank you.